Good morning, everyone. We're going to get started. My name is Becky. Welcome to Mothers Together this fine Thursday. Um, yeah, so today we're going to have Keith Riley joining us, and I'll introduce him in a little bit. Next week, we have Marcia Davis Cannon talking about re-energizing. And then I want to give a quick heads up to the following week of April 10th. So on April 10th, some schools have off, and other schools do not, but we are still meeting. And the plan for the in-person room is to make some Mother's Day gift baskets for the Help One Child foster and adoptive moms. So we're going to have an Amazon wish list for people online or in the room if you want to purchase items to add to those gift baskets, and we'll assemble them in the rooms here, and then they'll be saved for Mother's Day to give to the Help One Child ladies. They're collecting gift baskets. So that's the plan, and be on the lookout for a link for... And also, it'll be a link on Amazon, a registry on Amazon, but you can purchase the items wherever you want and bring them in person. So just if you get something, you can check it off that it's purchased, even if you don't get it from there. If you want to buy something local and bring it in, that's fine too. But that's an option to have that stuff. All right. Spring events are coming up in May, and if you would like to help with whatever way you can, let us know, and we'd love to have you volunteer with us for that Thursday or Saturday afternoon. And then again, some events around the church. This Saturday is the For the Bay 5K happening over at Shoreline. And then if Easter is coming too, we're like halfway through Lent right now, but we're already, Easter's coming. We got to plan for Easter. We can't just stay in Lent. But anyway, here at Mountain View, they're going to be hosting a Good Friday service. So there's opportunities to help set up on the Thursday before. And then other campuses will also have opportunities to help set up on Saturday and then also serve on Sunday itself. So if you can help, you can check out the links for where you could serve at Easter, and we would love to have you help out and make this a welcoming place. And then again, summer camp is happening June in Mountain View and in July in Saratoga, and June in Menlo Park in Saratoga, July here and at San Mateo. All right, so I'm going to pray for our morning. God, thank you for this time to be together, to hear from you and to hear from Keith. I pray that you would give us just a calm time and just that we could hear from you. Amen. All right, so Keith is the associate campus pastor at the Menlo Park campus, where he has served for 6 years. He's passionate about helping people find the sacred in their ordinary life, and he holds a D.Min in leadership and spiritual formation from Portland Seminary. He loves spending time in coffee shops, hiking in beautiful places, and being in Disneyland with his family. Keith is married to Liz, and they have a 7-year-old daughter, Amaya. So please welcome Keith.
Good? Yeah. Well, hi, good morning. Yeah, it's interesting what you wind up saying about yourself and how you identify yourself, I am often found in redwood forests. I love to be a hiker, especially in beautiful places that exist in California. I grew up in Texas, and especially in the Gulf area, which is down near Houston, and to be honest, it's pretty ugly. There's some beauty in the bayou, right? I like some good oak trees. But then you come to California and you're like, no, this is God's true creation. How could I want to be anywhere else but this beautiful land? And so I love to be outdoors in those places. I do love Disney quite a bit. I'm known as somebody that if you're going to go to Disneyland or Walt Disney World, I can actually help you plan your trip. I've been known to help my friends plan out their itineraries, best places to eat. No, don't go to that coffee shop. Go over to this one instead. The line's way shorter, right? I can help you with all those things. Around my campus, if people are looking for me and they don't know who I am yet, our team will just say, go look for the guy with the big beard. You'll know him when you see him, right? I also like baseball, if you can't tell. Forgive me for being in my baseball garb, but it's opening day for baseball and Major League Baseball, which is almost a holiday for me. I'm actually taking the rest of the day off to go watch baseball when I'm done here with you. And so I wind up being known by certain things and certain markers around who I am. But ultimately, all of those things are just some exterior things and are not the root identity of who I am. I am a father, I am a husband, I'm all these things, right? But today we're going to talk about these callings, these places that we live and are, being a mother, living in Mountain View, whatever it might be. We're going to talk about these things. And we're going to talk also about our root identity as beloved, sacred image bearers of God. Sound good? We're going to talk about those things. We'll see how the morning goes. I've been given my timestamp, so I know when to stop talking. So we'll see. And so I want us to root a little bit into the life of Jesus. I know you all remember intimately the other times I've been here and talked and can just bring up all the points that I talked about those other times just off the top of your head. But in case you can't, one of the things that I often talk about is that Jesus lived out of something that we like to call the cycle of grace. There's this whole study that you can go and look up called the Cycle of Grace. I was taught it by a guy named Trevor Hudson who pushed it all forward. And basically, this is just a study of the life of Jesus and seeing the ways in which Jesus lived. You've actually been talking about some of it, I think, in these previous weeks when you've been talking about rest and rhythms and Sabbath, right? And so in this cycle of grace, Jesus starts off in this little space where he knows deeply his identity as the beloved Son of God, right? We see this in Jesus' baptism scene. He comes up from the water, and there's this voice from heaven that says, "Behold, my beloved Son, in whom I'm well pleased," right? And Jesus lived out of this identity of knowing who he was, right? That's why Jesus teaches his disciples to pray to God as Abba. As Abba. I mean, you think about it, this is something that's pretty normal for us to approach God as this loving parental figure, this father figure. But it was actually Jesus that first teaches us to come to God in this way. And it's because Jesus deeply understood his place as this beloved Son of God, this beloved image bearer. From there, he has these kind of nurturing, healthy habits, right? Getting off into solitude, Sabbath, what you've been kind of talking about. And then from there, Jesus knows his significance, which is where he has been placed and what he is called to do in that moment. So for Jesus, that is to be the Messiah, the Son of God, right? And so today what I want us to talk about is these two kind of things. You've kind of been talking about these habits, this healthy spiritual practices of Sabbath and rest and things. And I want to talk about how we root and know our identity as beloved, and then how we see where God has placed us to be signposts of God's love within our life, okay? Sound good? You with me still? Good? Great, okay. So what I'd like to do is just to think about this in a story that happens within the Gospel of Mark, chapter 5. It's kind of an interesting story. Jesus has been hanging out in the northern region of Israel. It's kind of where he grew up, was up that way. By this point in his life, he has a house in Capernaum. He's living up on the kind of the Sea of Galilee area. But in this story, he gets in a boat and he crosses over to the other side, which was kind of more where the Greek population lived. And so he goes over there and he winds up on the shore. And as he gets there, it's called the country of the Gerasenes. And he steps out of the boat, and immediately a man out of the tombs with an unclean spirit met him. He lived among the tombs, and no one could restrain him anymore, even with a chain. For he had often been restrained with shackles and chains, but the chains he wrenched apart, and the shackles he broke in pieces. And no one had the strength to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and on the mountains, he was always howling and bruising himself with stones. But when he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and bowed down before him. And he shouted at the top of his voice, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I adjure you by God, do not torment me." For he had said to him, "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." Then Jesus asked him, "What is your name?"
And he replied, "My name is Legion, for we are many." He begged him earnestly not to send them out of the country. Now there on the hillside, a great herd of swine was feeding, and the unclean spirits begged him, "Send us into the swine, let's enter them." So he gave them permission, and the unclean spirits came out, entered the swine, and they went running off the bank into the sea. The swineherds run off because they're scared. They run into the town. They tell all the people in the town what had happened. And so they came to Jesus and saw the demoniac sitting there, clothed and in his right mind, the very man who had the legion, and they were afraid. So we're going to pause there for a second. So in this story, Jesus comes up into the graveyard, which this whole story has a lot of other kind of larger stories that are happening to the Israelite people that are listening to this story. Jesus going in an unclean territory, which is like a Greek space. So for the Jewish people of the day, that'd been like don't go there that often, or be careful when you go there. And then he goes into a graveyard. Graveyards were unclean to the Jewish people because of death and dead bodies and all these things. So going doubly unclean. And then inside this graveyard is this person who has been dealing with this spiritual torment, right? He's known as Legion, which has some double meanings to it. One, it's speaking of the amount of unclean spirits that are inside of him. But then it's also speaking to what has gone on in the country, in their world. Legion would have been a direct reference to the Roman legions of army soldiers who had marched in and occupied their territory, killing people, doing horrible things to women and children in that space, taking whatever they wanted from it, just completely possessing that land and making it their own, right? So there's some double meaning to this name Legion and what's going on here. So there's all these exterior meanings, right? But what I want you to see from this story today is here's this man who has been given an identity by the circumstances around him, by what's been forced upon him in some way, and then by the people as well, right? He's known as the demoniac, right? We never get his name to this point. He's just known as the demoniac, and then they chain him up and they put him in a graveyard. So when Jesus asks, "What is my name?" we still just get this Legion, right? It's about what has been done to him and what he does. That has become the root of his identity. So Jesus heals this man. Unclean spirits go out. People run off, and then they come back and they find this person who they've labeled demoniac sitting now in the posture of a disciple at Jesus' feet. So identity shifted and changed, right? He was naked, running around with chains still on his arms in a graveyard last time they saw him. And now he's clothed in his right mind and the posture of a disciple at the feet of a famous rabbi. They don't know what to do with it. They have no idea what to do with this. It's a complete and utter change in who this person is and their identity. They just don't know what to do with it. So those who had seen what had happened to the demoniac and the swine, they report this. And then they beg, in verse 17, they beg Jesus to leave the neighborhood. They're like, "We don't know what to do with this. This is so far out of our categories. Jesus, please go." And as he was getting in the boat, the man who had been possessed by demons begged him that he might be with him. But Jesus refused and said to him, "Go home to your friends and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and what mercy he has shown you." And he went away and began to proclaim in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and everyone was amazed. So why am I telling you this weird story about a demon-possessed man in Israel 2,000 years ago? And how does it relate to being a mom? These are great questions. Joy, you have the answers? Okay, no, that's still on me. Okay. So much of our life, right? We are given identities. We're given identities by various things, right? All the way back to our childhood, depending on how we wear, how smart we are, what sports we're good at, right? We begin to gain identities to where I'm a bearded man who loves to hike and go to Disneyland with my family and can often be found in coffee shops because I have a deep addiction to coffee. And then it becomes my identity. That's what we say so much, right?
It, it's about what we do, our habits, our hobbies, our relationships, right? They begin to form and shape us. But what happens, right, is that so much of life changes. Have you found that life changes? Your seasons change. Your roles, your responsibilities change. Even how you show up as a parent, as a mother changes in time, right? As your kids grow. Things happen, things shift. You fail at things. The job that you thought was going to be amazing doesn't work out. It turns out your kid gets in trouble at school and you feel like you failed as a mom. You move from one place to another. People leave you in relationships. Life shifts, life changes. And then our identity, if that's what's forming us and shaping us, if we're formed primarily by what we do, then what happens? It erodes. And we wonder, who am I? If I'm not defined by my job, then who am I? If I'm not defined by being a mom, then who am I? If I'm not defined by being a spouse to this person, then who am I? You are a beloved daughter of God. You are a sacred image bearer. And so what I want you to see is when we go in this cycle, what can happen is we focus on like what we do. And then that becomes how we start to define who we are. All of the things that we do, being a mom, job, all these things are good things. But I want us to see that they're actually the secondary to our root identity of being a beloved image bearer of God. So Jesus models this and lives out of this, and then he teaches this man to live out of this as well, right? So he redefines who he is, and he helps him to sit down and root in his identity as a beloved child of God at Jesus' feet. So he loses this exterior identity, and he comes and he realizes that he is beloved, that he is an image bearer of God. And it redefines how he shows up, who he is, where his posture of who he is in this setting. And then Jesus says, I want you to go back to the people that you know and simply be a signpost of God's love. Go back to where you're planted and point to what God's love has done inside of you. And so what the invitation I want you to think about is a little twofold. First, I want you to think about, what does it take for you to think about yourself as a beloved daughter of God, as an image bearer, being the foremost root of who you are? I don't know about you. It's not necessarily the most common thought on my mind, right? I wish that I could tell you I woke up every morning, looked in the mirror and said, hello, you fine-looking man. You are an image bearer of God. Go out into the world, beloved son of God. No, I don't say that in the morning, right? It's not necessarily our root thing, right? Because we have these other things that kind of cloud and they come up in front of us. And so to begin to root ourselves in this, even in the church it can be difficult, right? Because in the church, so often, we root our identity back in Genesis 3 instead of Genesis 1. We root our identity as a sinner. We're just a bunch of sinners. Just a bunch of sinners, which is true. We're broken. We're marred by evil and sin in the world. But guess what? God didn't make us as sinners. God made us as beloved image bearers of God in chapter 1 of Genesis. And then the fall happens. When you were born as a beloved image bearer of God. Ever hold a cute little baby? I don't hold a lot of babies, to be honest. I kind of get afraid of the whole neck situation. But I did well with my daughter. She survived. She lived. I got a hold of a little newborn not long ago. And again, it was like, okay, make sure I do this right. But when you hold that little newborn baby and you look in their face, what do you see? Just cute, sweet, innocent love, right? We are born and made and shaped in the image of God, and then sin and brokenness gets in us, and yes, that becomes something that we wind up doing in life. But our identity and what God and Jesus wants to restore us to and make us to see the truest part of who we are is an image bearer of God. a child of God. And when we can root within that identity, we can live within Sabbath and rest and all these good spiritual practices that bring us close to our loving God. And then we begin to see, okay, where has God planted me right now? Where has God planted me to be this signpost? This is a language that I just steal from other people. This is from N.T. Wright. He talks about how we are to be placed as signposts, these little markers, right? Signs are helpful, right? You show up to the Mountain View campus and you're trying to figure out where to go. And if there weren't signs out here, you might wind up at First Presbyterian Church, right? Instead of in here. If you're looking down the hallway, you might find at our campus that without signs, you would never find the bathrooms in Menlo Park. We hide them really, really well. So unless there were signs, you wouldn't know how to go and find that space, right? When we're driving, nowadays we use GPS, right, for everything. But in the olden days, if you remember these olden days, you had to look up. And believe it or not, at every cross section of streets still to today, there are these things called signs. And they tell you the street names. And so you know which way to turn, right? Signs are really important to help us to know where to go. And God uses sign markers all around the world to point people to God's love. And you, in the places that you are, can show up if you live out of your rootedness as God's beloved one, living out of that deep love. Then when you show up to these places where God has planted you to be a mother, to work where you work, to be a community partner where you are, to be somebody that shows up to this church, right? All these different places where we might mark our identities. When we show up into these places, we're able to understand that we are there to be image bearers of God's love, to point people to say, this is how God has loved me in my life, and now I'm going to show up in these places to be a signpost of love. To be a signpost of love. It might not shift a lot for you, or it might change everything of how you show up to places. I'm sure most of you know how to show up well into your relationships as somebody who is trying to love well, right? But what does it think for us to just think about, I'm showing up for my kid today to be a signpost of God's love for them. I'm showing up for my partner today to be a signpost of God's love for them. You're not going to always do that. I can speak from very well-known examples. But what would it do for us to begin to think about that? That I'm in this place, in these relationships right now, to be a signpost of love. I'm friends with the people that I'm friends with right now in this place because God has placed me to be friends with them, to be a signpost of God's love. My kid is in this certain school and I have to interact with these certain parents every single day at drop-off or whatever it might be, or these different functions where all of a sudden we're friends with these people, and the only reason we're friends with these people is because our kids go to the same school. Anybody else? Just me? And right there you're able to say, I'm going to show up into this space as a signpost of God's love. I'm going to show up as a signpost of God's love. Now, how do we do that? Well, it could be as simple as listening. I don't know about you. I'm distracted often, and it's about to get a lot more distracting now that baseball season's back. I'll just warn everybody close to me in my life. And we just live in a world of distractions, right? This little friend here. Everybody say hello to my number one distraction. Both my daughter, who's cute on my screen right there, and the phone itself, right? We live in this distracted world where so often, I listened to Scott's sermon. If you didn't get to hear Scott's sermon on Sunday, he talked about distractions and hurry and this pace of life, right? And after I heard Scott's sermon, Scott confessed to being not always great at such things, and then I was like, well, here's another pastor at Menlo Church that needs to confess and not being good at such things. And so my sweet little daughter, she has to be up at church all Sunday morning, and so I went and found her, and I just said, hey, I'm really sorry. Sometimes when we play Barbies or other toys that you like to play, Dad's on his phone sometimes, huh? She said, uh-huh. And I said, I'm really sorry that I've done that. I'm going to try to do a little bit better about putting the phone away when we're playing together, okay? And if you see me out on it, I want you to say something to me, okay? Can we make that deal? She's 7.5, and she said yes. And so then later that day, after church, we went home and we played Barbies, and I left my phone downstairs. It doesn't sound like a lot, right? But in that moment, in that afternoon, I was able to be a better signpost of God's love for her than I had been. And so, where are just the simple invitations in your life where you can just listen to people better, be more present, be more loving, to be able to live more fully into where God has placed you to be more present within that reality, from the rooted state of knowing that you are God's beloved. And so for some of us, it just starts with all the way back to there. Just rooting back and saying to yourself, maybe every day, I am not defined by what others say about me. I am not defined by what I do in this world. But my first and foremost, I am a child of God. I am a daughter of God. That is where I'm going to start. And then I'll move into everything else. But I'm going to allow myself to be centered within that reality. And just like the demoniac, to sit at Jesus' feet and let that to be my starting place. So I'm just going to pause just for a moment, and I just want we're going to have just a little quiet reflection here to listen to the Spirit speaking to us. And just as I've been talking, I just want you to think about, where do you maybe just sense a little invitation and nudge from God? And I'll just guide you here just a little bit. Maybe there's an invitation for you to just root and to think about, do I think of myself primarily as an image bearer of God? Which means to truly bear the image of Christ within my life, to allow it to be who I am, that root of God's love is who I am, that I am this daughter. Do you sense an invitation within that? Maybe you sense a little invitation thinking about the spaces in which God has placed you right now in your life. This season of your life, this season of motherhood, this season of working, not working, being part of the community in certain places. Maybe it's just to list out all the spaces and places that you are assigned. To name your relationships, to just take a survey of, God, where have you placed me to be a signpost of your love, and how am I doing at that? With a lot of grace to self, not being shameful, but how am I doing at being a signpost of your love? And so what I hope is that as you kind of root within these, you're able to see that your every single day is just rooted and sacred, full of God. That all of the normal places where God has placed you are places where God is with you and is ready to show up in love through you. That every day is just teeming with God's love and energy. That every relationship that you have is a place for you to move deeper in love with God and that person. Now, this beautiful, sacred, ordinary life that we live is the exact place where God is wanting to show up and be with you and remind you that you are a beloved daughter of God. So God, may it be that we find our identities in you and you alone this day and every day ahead. Amen.
Great. Thank you so much, Keith. You were giving us the quiz, like, yeah, you remember all my talks from before. I'm like, I do. I remember the cycle of grace because that was like such a profound thing for me to think about as like motherhood and like, who am I? I'm not like the things defined by my kids, but like it pours out the other way. And so I think it's a good reminder again to see like, yeah, the cycle of grace, like our identities start with God and then that pours out into how we live out versus the other way around and shaping us. So, yeah, thank you again for bringing that note and enjoy your baseball this afternoon. All right, so we've got some discussion questions on the table. Have at it, and we'll be back up here to dismiss this in about an hour. Okay, thanks.